breaking news, guys. Today I'm here to talk about the bomb that was dropped earlier today, and that is that Disney and Sony are fighting over Spider-Man. Yes, and what's gonna happen is that Spider-Man might leave the MCU. Now, there is kind of a negotiation that is still going on, so it's not a done deal. But a lot of people are very confused to why can they even do that? How can Sony be able to do this? You know, especially after the big success that was the latest film. It made $1 billion. Well, I'm going to try to break it down and explain to you why Sony is able to do all of this. And not only that, how could this even affect the MCU? Because if you look back on all these big films, Spider-Man was a big part, you know? I mean, one of the most iconic parts of Infinity War, it was like that scene with Spider-Man and Tony Stark. And he was also very keen on the whole Tony Stark arc. So for me, I feel that it's very unlikely that Disney would just let Spider-Man go. But we all know that Disney is now eating every single studio, you know, they're destroying every single studio because they're so powerful, they have so much money. And right after the movie came out, it made $1 billion. Well, now their negotiations are going on, and the deal before was that Disney could make 5% of the profits from the films. However, after the $1 billion movie that was produced by Kevin Feige right now, the latest one, which is also connected to Phase 4, Disney say, wait a minute, we want to change the deal, so we're gonna go 50-50. So they wanted to make 50-50 on the whole profits of the film. And of course, Sony would go, no, are you crazy? No. But all of this story goes back to 1999, you know. There was a time where Marvel was struggling, they were going almost bankrupt. And what happened is that they were willing to sell pretty much all of their characters, but Sony decided to buy Spider-Man. So that's what they did. They bought Spider-Man and Venom, but they didn't really buy the rest. And ever since then, Sony really owns the rights to Spider-Man. So Sony is in a right here, like they own the character. So what's been going on up to now, the reason why Spider-Man was able to be part of the MCU is because Disney signed a deal with Sony, allowing the character to appear in the MCU, you know, and that's why we had these wonderful movies. And so basically they were doing a partnership, and it was working great, fantastic. But of course, now that Spider-Man became $1 billion film, of course, money, this executive people are going to start fighting. So now Disney is trying to change the deal. So Disney still owns the right to all the merchandise, the Spider-Man merchandise, and they're also able to do 5% on the whole profits of the film. And they were producing the film because they're of the whole connection with the MCU. However, now, because they're trying to change the deal, Sony pretty much said, no, are you crazy? No, we made $1 billion film. This is our character. We own the character. No. And it's terrible for us, the fans. Of course, we are the ones to suffer. This is still not a done deal, but I have to talk about this. So at the end of the day, guys, Sony owns Spider-Man. The rights is there, so there's nothing that Disney can do unless Disney decides to buy Spider-Man from Sony. But of course, they are gonna have to pay a lot of money. Like it's gonna be definitely in the billion house. It's really funny because you would think that Disney is so powerful, it's been eating every single studio, you know, buying the rights to this, buying the rights to that, but now there's nothing they can do about Spider-Man. You know, just continue the deal. But I don't believe that Sony will go 50-50. That is just crazy. There's no way that Sony would do that. Oh, so let's have a look at this chart over here. So this is how the rights are working right now. Okay, so so here are all the Marvel characters that actually belongs to Marvel Studios. And believe it or not, in 1999 they were willing to sell all of them because, like I said, they were almost bankrupt until they found Kevin Feige, you know, and also until Disney bought Marvel. and hired Kevin Feige, because what you really need to make superheroes work is to get a guy that understands comic books and to get a guy that is also fan of the characters, because that's how it works. You know, you need someone that has that creative mind, not only the business side of the thing, you know. And then here you have 20th Century Fox, so those are all the characters that were the X-Men characters, and but now, of course, Disney bought these as well. So now all the X-Men are also part of the Marvel studio. But here it is, Sony Studios, and they own Spider-Man and Venom. So there's nothing that Marvel can do without Sony's permission. So Sony needs to say yes or no, you know. And now, if Disney is really willing to say goodbye Spider-Man, which I think would be very stupid, because, you know, Spider-Man is all over their parks. Spider-Man is also, they have the rights to their merchandise, and, you know, it's not like Disney could not afford this, you know. Of course, and now Sony is making $1 billion, they want a share of the thing. Okay, it's making $1 billion, now we have to go 50-50. But let's have a look and see what are the articles saying, because everyone is telling a different story. Exclusive: Marvel Studios president Kevin Feige won't produce any further Spider-Man films because of an inability by Disney and Sony Pictures to reach new terms that would have given the former and co-financing stakes going forward. A dispute that has taken place over the past few months at the top of Disney and Sony has essentially nixed Feige and the future involvement of Marvel and Spider-Man universe, sources said. So what was going on here is that even though Kevin Feige was producing the films, the money was still coming from Sony, because, like I said, they own the rights, and Disney was only taking 5% of the film. But now that he make $1 billion, Disney go, uh-oh, now that is $1 billion house, we want 50-50. So they can't just change the deal like that and expect Sony. Like I said, this is Disney trying to eat every single studio, you know. And you know what? Back in the day when Sony bought Spider-Man in 1999, and then they kind of, you know, created the character, they gave us great films with Tobey Maguire. I mean, not all of them, but at least the first and the second one were pretty good films. And even though the other reboot was not very good, but I mean, they kind of started a character. So I'm a little bit siding with Sony here, but I don't want Spider-Man to leave the MCU, because, you know, it's just so good to see this universe. And now, how are we going to think of Spider-Man without Iron Man? Because if this deal really closes and they really pulled Spider-Man out of the MCU, he won't even be able to mention Tony Stark, you know, and all of that stuff is just, it's going to be very weird. However, I believe there's still one movie that is under contract, so with the MCU, so perhaps there still will be doing one more movie. But going forward, if Disney really continues to press on this 50-50, I believe Sony is going to say, no, let's continue. This comes at a moment where the last two films Kevin Feige produced broke all-time records. Disney Avengers Endgame became the highest grossing film of all time, and Spider-Man Far From Home this week surpassed the James Bond film Skyfall to become the all-time highest grossing film for Sony Pictures. Whew. Sources said there are 2 more Spider-Man films in the works, and the studio hopes to have director John Watts and Tom Holland front and center, though Watts doesn't have a deal for the next picture and isn't a lock to return. That isn't helped by the fact that unless something dramatic happens, Feige won't be the lead creative producer of the pictures. Now that is my fear right here. If Kevin is not the lead producer, that's where the movies will suffer, because the latest reboot that Sony did was not very good. Even though the first one was good, but not this one. Let's see what else he's saying. There is a lot of webbling here, but it all comes down to money. Money! And it's easy to understand why both sides refuse to give ground. Disney asked the future Spider-Man films to be 50-50 co-financing. See, because Sony financed the entire film, so the money did not come from Disney at all. They still made 5%, but they didn't finance anything. Arrangement between the studios, and there were discussions that this might extend to other films in Spider-Man universe. See, because, you know, there's also Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse that was a great success and also received an Oscar. Look how noisy New York is. It received an Oscar, and there's also the video games. That has nothing to do with Disney. So Spider-Man is very profitable to Sony. There's no way they're going to go 50-50. No way. Like, this is Disney trying to eat every single studio alive. Sony turned down that offer down flat. Of course they would. Like, even I might not even understand business that well. I would say, are you kidding me? No. Sources said that Sony, led by Tom Hoffman and Tony Vinciquerra, I might pronounce this wrong, came back with other configurations, but Disney didn't want to do that. But Sony did not want to share its biggest franchise. Sure, Disney would be putting up half of the funding, but the risk is in how much you're going to make back in profit. Of course, this is just stupid. Sony would be stupid to do that, but the problem is that if they, if they continue this fight, guys, forget it. We're not gonna have Spider-Man on the MCU, and again, it all comes down to money, and that is a sad part of entertainment. You have to remember that behind it all, there's all these executive people making these decisions, and it could change. The universe was going so well, especially now that they're bringing the X-Men and Deadpool, and then this happens. Spider-Man is such a big player in the universe. Like, I believe it's gonna suffer. So the current deal, like I said, it was the 5%, and Disney doesn't want that anymore. Disney is so greedy. It's not like they don't have the money, and they still want to profit. Disney didn't give any money for the latest Spider-Man. Only Kevin Feige was behind the scenes producing the films, but other than that, the money all came from Sony. But now, yeah, things are changing. Okie dokie, guys. Anyways, guys, so those are the news. I hope I made it a little bit clear if you didn't really understand what's going on with the whole Spider-Man deal. I believe that right now, of course, this is still going on, so it's an ongoing story. We will find out more news very soon. However, I don't believe that Disney will indeed forget about Spider-Man like that. If they continue this fight, of course that's gonna happen, but that's just gonna be terrible for the parks and even for continuity of the universe. Like, so far, why can't they not play nice? These guys, everything was going so fine, so well. But anyways, drop your comments below. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this whole fight, Disney and Sony. Who do you side with? I'd love to hear your thoughts, and if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit that thumbs up, subscribe for more, and I'll see you next time. Bye.